You're listening to the Podcast Detroit Network. Visit www.podcastdetroit.com for more information.
1935, the Lions win the NFL championship. The Detroit Tigers take the World Series. The Red Wings bring home Lord Stanley's Cup. Joe Louis begins his rise to world domination. This transforms the Motor City into Detroit, City of Champions.
Detroit City of Champions podcast. I'm Jamie Flanagan.
Charles Avison.
And we are diving deep into a trilogy of books, Detroit City of Champions, and then 2 more editions, all about the players. And 6 years in the making, 7 years in the making.
Something like
between
that.
all
I kind of lose count a little bit.
3 of the books.
I got to think about, I don't even know. I think it was 7 years it took for it all told.
And we've talked about the Tigers. We're talking about Mickey Cochran, his impact. Last time we talked about the players, just the amazing lineup of quirky players that kind of carried over from 33 into 34. Not a whole lot of changes going on, but a whole lot of change in the performance. And talking about 7 years in the making for these books. Do you know how many years in the making it was? Because this was their first championship. Didn't come until 1935, so this was their first kick at the cat.
It was many years in the making.
How long were they a team? Do you know how long they were a team before?
The Tigers?
Yeah.
1901.
1901?
Yep.
All right, from the get-go, huh?
Yep, and then there was, because that's a whole interesting story into itself. And before we even jump into what we're talking about, I can dive into it a little, just a hair.
So, all right, so it was 33 years in the making, 32 years in the making to get to their first pennant.
Well, here's the thing. In 1907, 1908, 1909, the Tigers went to the World Series three times.
Okay.
They went there 3 times. And a lot of fans think that they won at least one of those with Ty Cobb. Ty Cobb is such a iconic figure in Detroit sports history that they just sort of assume, and that's not true at all. 1907 and 1908, they lost to the Cubs. In 1909, they lost to the Pirates. And so it was, they lost all 3. And really, those World Series, them getting to the World Series with Cobb and all that, was really what made the Tigers such an institution in Detroit.
Right.
They were a legitimate competitive team with Ty Cobb and all that. And it's when Cobb left the Tigers in 1924 that the team just became rudderless. It was really just a floundering. It was really somewhat of a floundering organization after that point. And that was really the dark age for the Tigers, was between the 1924 when Cobb left and really 1934, a 10-year span where they were just, who were they? There was no identity to this team.
Right, and then you get a lot of droughts. The Tigers, they're a team with some shining moments, and then a lot of droughts. We're living through another one right now.
It's ugly. It's real ugly.
We're in the midst of another drought right now, but that took us from those good years.
You're not wrong. It seems like the whole history of the Tigers, especially, has been one of where they have these huge droughts, and then when they do come out of nowhere, so to speak, there's 2, 3 just incredible magical years, and everybody gets really super excited. And it's the defining moment of many people's lives was I can't even tell you how many stories I've heard, especially on the road selling books at art shows and stuff like this, where I was there at the 68 World Series, or I was there. It seems I think there was must have been 200,000 fans at that game, those games, because there was everybody was been there.
The last time we won was
1984. 1984. It's been a drought. We've been to the World Series a couple times in the 2000s, but the last time we won, it's been a drought since then as well.
Yeah, I remember that. I graduated high school in 1984.
All right.
And I got a job working at Domino's Pizza.
There you go.
And it was nuts because Tom Monahan owned Domino's, and that was the year he bought the Tigers. And so we got to switch our uniforms from Domino's pizza hats to Detroit Tiger hats. We thought we were very, very cool. And the city was just
cool.
there was a mania for the Tigers.
Oh, yeah.
And then there was a mania for Domino's Pizza. We were crazy busy during the series. And then
I've read Tom Monahan's autobiography, and he said it's called Pizza Tiger. Great book if anyone wants to read it.
Yeah.
And he talks about he was just talking about how he bought the team.
Yeah,
fascinating story just into itself. But also how the Tigers made Domino's literally a household name across the country.
And
it was already big. It was already on its way towards that point. But by him buying Domino's being associated with the Tigers, it really does. There is something to that idea of a branding sponsorship with the, you know what I mean? Like with it being associated with a team like that, it really, it just exploded the name Domino's across the country.
We had, so one of the guys I worked with, at the stores I was at in the suburbs, Jay Kirstein, I think, I want to say Kirstein, but he was he became the manager of the Michigan Avenue store, the one right across from Tiger Stadium. That that was a big deal to be the manager of the stadium store.
Oh, I'm sure, yeah.
And this was a handful of years after 84, but we'd go in there and the trophy was there. Yeah. And they had, special rooms and stuff. It was cool. So Jay, we got to see that. It was kind of cool being that close to the stadium and all the memorabilia and stuff that was there. And that was a really cool experience. But we've had a hell of a drought since 84.
It's been ugly. I mean, the 2000s, the Tigers went to the World Series a couple times.
Well, there was the one year
time.
they were awful.
Yeah.
It was awful the one year, and then the year they went to the series.
They went in 2006, and then, man, I hate, I think it was 2012 was the next one. There was another one after, I think it was
They had a horrific season, and then the next season, everybody was like, yeah, whatever, and then they made it to the series.
Yeah.
Because we went, some of my high school friends, and they it's like one of their companies had suites, and it was like the beginning of the year, and it's like, oh, we got to see 2 or 3 games at the beginning of the year from the suites, and then they started winning. Yeah, and it's like our suite parties were done because people wanted to go again.
Sure,
I kind of like when a team's failing because you get cheap tickets.
Yeah, I say that in a book. One of my friends, Kevin Bush, I say that he tells me, he was like, "Oh man, I miss the old days where the tickets were crappy because it was so much easier to get tickets. Like you could have your whole section to yourself."
Because I like going because the Detroit City of Champions. We're going to be talking about the Red Wings. We're going to be talking about the Lions and just all the other 32 championships that were won. In 1935. I like to go to at least one major sporting event for each team every year. I'm not and I told you I'm not a sports guy. I just love the city. I love the teams. Sure. I love the atmosphere. And I love going, and that's all Detroit had going for it was the love of the sport itself because we weren't champions in 32 or 33.
It's just like these people got excited about it. It was something to get really because you're in the middle of the Great Depression again. The attendance was fading terribly in 1933. It was at its worst level since 1907.
Right.
And it's the middle of the Great Depression. They got better things to spend their money on than watching a terrible team every day. You know, so. But then all of a sudden, when Mickey Cochran comes to town and he's like, "We're going to the World Series, get ready!"
We're winning the pennant. And they're like, "Okay," and then they did.
And then as soon as they started winning, all these fans started to get really excited, and they started, coming to, it was something to get excited about.
Right.
And when there's no excitement, when everything's just down and everything, kind of like it's a tough time now. If something comes out right now and it sparks a huge bit of enthusiasm. People are going to gravitate toward it. Watch and see. The next thing that comes out right now that's that's not polarized, that has some kind of a universal appeal that's really exciting. Yeah. That you're going to see everybody just get really excited. I think it's something kind of like that with like the whole, I've been getting into the stock market and like Tesla lately has just been out of control.
Yeah.
And it's something like that. I think it's like that too when there's something exciting in a time where everywhere you turn is negative and dark and everything's falling apart. Then there's something exciting. Everybody gravitates towards the benefit of that particular thing.
Yeah.
And that's how really what the Tigers in 34 was all of a sudden like, man, they're the most exciting thing that there was. And everybody's just pouring into games. I have all these photos in here where the fans back then, if there wasn't enough seating for fans, well, they ain't going to turn you away.
Right.
The money.
Yeah. The fire marshal wasn't shutting stuff down back then.
Yeah. So they're not shutting anything down. No. So all they did was they rope off sections of the outfield so the fans would have to sit behind it. As just a tremendous photos in the second book where you actually have police on horseback on the field. keeping the fans from getting any further than a little 2-foot perimeter that's roped off.
I love it.
And in that case, that wasn't even roped off. They just had fans sitting with their backs against the outfield wall.
So much for the warning track.
That's the warning
Steve's
track.
Face.
Yeah, exactly. That's how exactly. And I actually wrote in a section in the movie where Joe Louis in 1934 is at a Tiger game like that. where he's actually in the, part of the overflow crowd, and he actually sees a Hank Greenberg home run getting hit. And then in another episode of the movie, you see it from a different perspective, which is Hank Greenberg hitting the home run. That same scene from like Hank's perspective in a different, section. So that's what I mean. So it was interesting,
So yeah, 1934 though, they cinched the pennant, with a good handful of games to go. So there was excitement. So Detroit knew, hey, we're going to the World Series, right? And so there's you had like these pregame games, which were probably pretty exciting. People just coming to them and filling the stands, knowing they're not going to get a World Series ticket, but we get to see this World Series team.
Sure.
And so the city just had to be on fire there those last 4 weeks.
It was Tigers Mania, absolutely. It was Tigers Mania and going into the World Series. And then, it kind of introduces the World Series itself, which is this with the St. Louis Cardinals in 1934.
So they faced the Cardinals.
The St. Louis Cardinals. And the thing about the Cardinal, and that's what's so interesting about the Detroit Tiger history is we have these histories with these specific teams. With the Tigers, they faced the Cubs in 1907, 1908. And then we faced them again in 1935, and then we faced the Cubs again in the 1945 World Series. So we play the Cubs 4 times.
I was like the Wings with the Avalanche. You just have these rivalries.
Yeah, but they stretch over 100 years, And then so the same thing with the Cardinals. Yeah. And by the way, the 1984, the Tigers should have faced the Cubs in the 1984 World Series. The Cubs were one of the best teams in the National League. Yeah. And the San Diego just beat them in the last round right before the World Series. And so that's what I'm saying. Like it almost was another Tigers Cubs matchup in 1984. Like how cool would that have been? But it's same with the Cardinals. Look at the Cardinals. Faced the Cardinals in 34, faced the Cardinals in 68, and faced the Cardinals again in 2006. I mean, it stretches, the same team. The Tigers have been to the World Series 50 times. You can go, it's, they face a bunch of teams a bunch of times, But no, they've been in this World Series a certain amount of times, and it's been like 40% with the Cardinals, 40%, whatever, high percentage were against the same team. Wow. So that's what I'm saying. You have this rivalry, World Series rivalry that stretches over 100 years. And in this case, this is really where the rivalry with the Cardinals begins, is 34.
Well, let's break down this Heartbreak. Because you said you talked to a woman.
The entire end of the show.
Oh,
it's all good.
We know. Because you said you met this.
Spoiler alert.
You met the, yeah, we know.
Spoiler alert. Just ruined it. Supposed to say spoiler when you're giving away.
Spoiler alert. Well, if somebody's listening to this, come on.
They're listening. We got like 10,000 listeners.
They got to know. They got to know. They got to know that it was,
Yeah, 30, no, you're right. We've already given it away a little bit.
But so you said you were at one of the art fairs, and you had met a woman, because a lot of times you sell these books at an art fair, and you met a woman who was at the 34.
Yeah.
She
was
remembers
like 90
34.
or something. It was a few years ago. Yeah.
And she said it was still the biggest heartbreak in her life. What was that?
Yeah, she was like, I know they. I was like, the Tigers and all them won. When it's somebody that's looks like they may have been there. I actually kind of defer to them to see. They'll look at the newspaper, the old newspaper, because I usually have the original when I do the shows.
Yeah.
And so the old news, they'll look at this old newspaper. And they'll and I'll be like, see anybody you recognize, and they will. They'll be like, oh yeah, I remember this person. So, but she was like. She's like, I still haven't gotten over the 34 World Series. She's like, they won in 35, but she goes, it was that much of a disappointment. And I think that's one of the goals of this episode is that I want to try to portray in this is to just show just how much of a heartbreak it was.
We went all the way to, we went seven games. So what game number one? Set me up game number one.
Well, so just to take you up to game number one, just once again, let's just phrase the context.
Is there a play? Was there like today? There's like a bazillion playoff games.
No, there was none.
So it was like, all right. So
the
you had the best
was
record.
The playoff.
So so you had the best record.
Yeah,
you won the pennant. You're going to the series.
Yeah. Okay. So that's what I'm saying. That's kind of like why, baseball, one of the things that I think baseball needs to, a lot of, they add this year. In fact, they've added more playoff teams to it. So I think it's 16 out of 30 teams go to the playoffs, which is like, you know what I mean? Like it waters it down. Like it waters down the importance of it, I think.
Right.
But that's why it's so interesting about back in the day was like you played all season long. And then if you had the best record at the end, you won the pennant and you're headed to the World Series.
Okay.
So it made every single game all year long incredibly important.
Okay.
Incredibly important. Especially imagine imagine a pennant race at the end of the year. You know, you played all summer long, and it's come down to two teams that are battling it out. Game, you know, there's only a half a game between them, and they're, you know, everybody's just literally staring at the box scores every day to see which team won, who got the hits. I mean, it's intensified every single game throughout the entire year.
You're not playing to make the playoffs. You're playing
for the to go to the World Series.
So there's a different I'm sure there's a different mindset, and a different approach to managing that sort of thing. Well, that's your other thing.
It is my other thing. We
got
to stay a little bit away from the modern day analytics because things will change in a hurry. But you get the idea. The idea being like, you know, think about it like this, like, you know, the modern day, you know, you have to get to the playoffs. You know, you win your division, and there's 3 divisions. You win your division, and you go to the playoffs. But there's, you know, but because there's only 3 divisions, they add what's called a wild card team to the mix. And so the wild card team, you know, originally, like there was an abnormal number of wild card teams that were going to the World Series.
Yeah.
So what they had to do was they wanted to make it just add like a little bit of a hindrance for these wild card teams to go to the playoffs. So what they did was added a second wild card team. So now the way that it is the top 3 division winners go to the playoffs, and then the next 2 teams with the next best records face each other in a 1-game playoff to decide who actually goes to the full-on playoffs. But so what happens is that, you know, these teams going down to the wire, you know, with like maybe 20, 30, you know, at the trading deadline, however many games there is left in that, like 40 games, it's almost like there's not really incentive to like sell out and like trade like a top prospect or whatever to try to make that 1-game playoff because it's such a coin toss. And so you see what I'm saying? Like, so it's almost like they just go, well, if we make it, we make it, you know?
Yeah.
It's exciting. I mean, it's intense, but they don't really, you know, it's a different mindset. If there's a whole year riding on like just a handful of games, if you win, you win. You know, there's a ton of money to be made in playoff games, so it's not something that'll ever go away.
Right.
But in this case, like I say, it's, you know, this is the situation is you got the Tigers who have made this incredible rise, this just you know, just ride where they've taken fans on this journey through an entire season. They've knocked off the New York Yankees with Babe Ruth, Lou Gehrig, Tony Lazzeri, Bill Dickey. Bill Dickey's one of the best catchers of all time. Bill Dickey's amazing. And you know, Lefty Gomez. I mean, Lefty is all talking about Schoolboy Rowe, Tommy Bridges, and we're about to talk about Dizzy Dean in a big way. You know, he's the best pitchers in baseball. But Lefty Gomez for the Yankees, he's one of the best. If he's probably better than all of them. Lefty Gomez is like the guy, and they beat him. Yeah. You know, I mean, they're saying like they knocked off the mighty Yankees and got through. You know, the whole year it's Yankees Tigers. That's all the speculation, and they get past the Yankees. So they've taken the fans in this incredible, out of nowhere journey, you know, to the World Series, and now here they are.
Yeah,
you see, like, I mean, they're playing for all. Now they're like, you know, this is not just bonus round. Like now it's like, please God, you know, finish off this season with an incredible exclamation point to finish this story. And that's really where we jump into the, you know, to who they face, and that's really, I think, who they face in the context of who these like pitchers were, you know, the players were and all this, I think it really draws you into the dynamic of this World Series, which is just fascinating. And as we already mentioned, the number one, the pitcher, Dizzy Dean, and it starts with Dizzy Dean. It's unquestionably the story of the 1934 World Series begins with Dizzy Dean. Dizzy Dean. I've got it written. He's got numerous situations. So 1934 MVP for the National League, whereas the Tigers have Mickey Cochran, the 1934 American League MVP. So he's the most outstanding athlete of the year by the Associated Press. That's the award that Joe Louis would win in 1935 in the subsequent year. And he would be on the cover of Time magazine in 1935, just like Mickey Cochran, cover of Time magazine, Sports. So it shows you like what Mickey Cochran was to the Tigers, Dizzy Dean, this pitcher, was to the Cardinals.
Okay.
And so in 1934, he wins 30 games, which I forgot what we say. There's 154 games that year. Was it
152? I thought
152. That's something like that. So yeah, we got it down. But anyways, like he won 30 of those games.
Yeah.
So what is that? What's one? You're the man. You're the teacher. What's 150?
It's my impression
out
there
of
would
30?
be no
What is
man.
that? 1/5? What is that? 1/5 of the games he won? I mean, whatever that is. Like 150 out of 30. I mean, it's a lot of games. He won 130 of them out of 150 or whatever. So it's a lot of games that he wins. But besides that, besides just the wins, you know, besides the fact that he's this dominant pitcher, is Dizzy Dean has this. He has got like you talk about athletes with swagger nowadays, or with this like a Muhammad Ali, like, you know, brash talking, predicting what they're gonna, you know, saying what they're gonna do, and then going and doing it. These type of athletes where they're like almost like showboats, but they do it because they're so much better than everybody else that when they do it, they're like, I told you I was going to do it. This is like another day at the office. They have so much confidence in themselves and swagger and brashness. That was Dizzy Dean. Like, I mean, in every way, like he was always just showman on the mound, in just incredibly, I mean, people, borderline arrogant. I mean, but at the same time, like I say, but everybody loved him in that regard. You see what I'm saying? He was like this brash pitcher. But anyways, so, and then besides that, he's got his brother Paul on the team, and he's the second best pitcher on the team, Paul Dean. So you got Dizzy and Paul, and they tried to attach the name Dazzy to Paul, so it was like Dizzy and Dazzy Dean. But Paul, it was just
wasn't
generally Paul. Yeah, he didn't really necessarily. It didn't really stick too well. But because Paul was sort of a more of a laid back character in comparison to his brother Dizzy, who was just this nutcase really. Just a character. A character is a better word than a nutcase. He's just a total character. And so anyways, this Dizzy Lee is like. The team sort of like takes on this personality of Dizzy Dean. And they're like, I mean, Dizzy's from down south. He's from Arkansas, which is the same place as Schoolboy Rowe, so from down south. And there's sort of like, with the rise of Dizzy Dean and Schoolboy Rowe, there was this sort of like almost like a folklore that was created around these guys. That like you have these, that any kid like from, down south farm boy could grow up to become the idol of millions, like there was this sort of folklore that developed around them. And, that's like I say, that it's with Dizzy, he's like, that this team takes on this personality. So whereas the Tigers are a bunch of scrappers, they're a bunch of guys led by this, winningest guy, Mickey Cochran. The Cardinals were different because they were like, it was almost like they were, they would show up to games wearing, with dirty uniforms from the game before. They embraced this like dirty dog, terribly foul mouth. We're gonna spike you in the game, like we're gonna do anything we can to win. Like total scrapper type mentality. Yeah. And the nickname of this team of this 34 of these Cardinals is the Gas House Gang. They call it. It's one of the most. Almost like it's like a team that's almost like shrouded in mythology, legendary, really. But they call them the Gas House Gang, and there's so many different theories as to why they call them the Gas House Gang. Dizzy Dean owned a gas station, and they would say all these guys hung out there, the Gas House Gang. Another theory is that there was a term called a gas house back in the 30s, which referred to people that lived like near like a coal processing plant, which was like the underprivileged area, which they lived there, a bunch of gas housers type of thing. But there's a bunch of different theories. Nothing's ever been like nailed in stone as to why they called them the Gas House Gang. But that was their identity, and they were like this total bunch of scrappers in that. So here's the Tigers coming into the World Series, and that's who they're facing is this bunch of ruffians, like a bunch of freaking a bunch of freaking toughs, like that's what they're, led by this guy who shows up in one of the first days of batting practice. The Tigers are taking batting practice, and he's got this tiger skin rug on his shoulders. Dizzy, do I have to mention Dizzy Dean wearing this tiger rug on his back? He's like, I already skinned me a tiger already. My God. Like he's like just
that's
that.
Fantastic.
He's a character. Yeah, he's a total character. Yeah. So so that's what I mean. So this is the guy that the Tigers have to beat. Is this guy who is like this invincible pitcher this year,
right? Who
is just like, and he's telling the world, just to give you another example of how good, a dominant level of he actually at one point said that that him and his brother were gonna win 45 games in 19, which is an unheard of number of wins. And or 40, I think he said 40 wins total. And they no, it wasn't. He predicted that they were going to win 45. And on the day, on this one particular day, both players, like Dizzy, they each needed one more win to get to this 45 total. He said, me and Paul are going to win 45 this year, 45 games. And on the day that they were scheduled to basically win this 40, each of them, if each of them had won, it would have equaled 45 total games. Dizzy Dean, it was a doubleheader that they both pitched, 2 games in the same day. In that morning, in the first half of the doubleheader, Dizzy almost throws a no-hitter and only loses it in the 9th and throws a complete game shutout to get to game number 44 that the two of them had won together. And then in the nightcap, the second game, his brother Paul does throw a no-hitter to win the 45th game. Like, that's the kind of season they had. They had their own sort of magical run in this year. And so, they come into this game, again, just totally swagger. And there's also one more element that is essential to understand about this World Series, it's not talked about anywhere. Which is the historical connections between Mickey Cochran and this team.
Okay, I love when you say that.
Yeah,
it's because this isn't written about anywhere. Sorry,
it's really
Mickey
not.
Cochran connected to St. Louis.
Yeah, so his connection is that when he was with the Philadelphia A's in 1931. So the Philadelphia A's went to 3 consecutive World Series, as we've mentioned, right?
Yeah.
And so 1929, 1930, they won these 2 World Series, and then in 31, it was their 3rd straight World Series appearance, and they lost. And in this particular, Dizzy Dean wasn't part of that World Series. He was just he was very early. He was right in the beginning of his career, and so he didn't pitch in that World Series. But there's a guy named Pepper Martin who was, and Pepper Martin has one of the best World Series in baseball history. I mean, leading hitter, leading run, scored the most, leading run producer, scoring the most runs of anybody in the World Series. Led in the hits, doubles, RBIs, and most in particular, really how it attaches to Mickey Cochran is stolen bases. He had stolen 5 stolen bases. Pepper Martin stole 5. This guy's nickname is the Wild Horse of the Osage. Okay. The Wild Horse. Okay, this this. So he ran wild. He stole 5 bases, and who's the catcher? Mickey Cochran. So Mickey, takes losing incredibly hard. So they're going in the World Series, and this is a chance for Mickey to revenge this awful display from the 1931 World Series where Pepper Martin ran all over the place. So a chance for redemption, so to speak,
right?
With them. So it kind of sets up, and I actually kind of one of the themes that I have in the movie with Mickey Cochran is that he's actually kind of tormented by this because he was such an intense winner loser. It would be hard to not imagine that he would be. He certainly remember what Pepper Martin did to him in the 31 World Series and be like, there's no chance he's doing that to me again. Right. Whether he was tormented by it or not, I don't know, but it was definitely in his mind. So anyways, it sort of sets up the situation here. So you've got 2 teams that basically have had these magical runs, through their seasons, and they're colliding in the World Series, and only one of them can win. So, game 1 of the World Series at Detroit, Dizzy Dean versus General Crowder. The Cardinals win first game 1, 8-3. They get beat. So, Dizzy Dean complete game, General Crowder 5 innings pitched. Doesn't have that the magic that he'd had thus far in the season.
Right.
And then where it gets interesting, so game number 2, the Tigers even the score. And this is there's a couple of interesting components I think in this game. But go ahead.
We lost somebody, right, coming into the game. One of the key players for the Tigers was injured. Was somebody injured? And then
not in 34.
35.
Yeah, 35. Okay. 35 was the big. Yeah, that was a. I don't know if we want to do a spoiler alert now, but that's a key component of that entire story.
Yeah. Okay.
But anyways, they're relatively healthy as far as unless I missed something.
Okay.
But,
no. I got I don't know. So I got confused. I knew there was a player but that was for the 35.
Yeah, it was 35. Right. Yeah.
So the team was pretty intact. They were pretty healthy coming into this.
They had as good a shot as any.
Okay.
They're ready to
go.
That's
good. It's and God, especially then, because it's it was like you said, St. Louis. They're coming in with their spikes up, and
it's a
looking
battle.
to take you out.
Mickey himself. He doesn't let people score. Oh, we already talked about it with Ray Hayworth in the last episode, or whatever. Ray Hayworth, how they didn't like people scoring runs on them, so they would hit the player as they came in, catch the ball, and then tag them. That. Now you're not allowed to run into the catcher.
Right.
But back then, and really up until a few years ago, catchers used to get exploded at home plate because the player would be coming around. From third and just barrel into him Deion Sanders, football player. I think Bo Jackson crushed a catcher too one time. And he's a football player.
And they know how to hit.
Yeah. So anyway, Mickey was famous for that. He was famous for taking the hit, but still getting that out at home plate because the ball would be a split second or 2 seconds later, and he'd take the hit, then apply the tag.
So amazingly healthy going into this series,
considering all that. Yeah.
Second game, who was on the mound for us in the second game?
Second game, you got Schoolboy Rowe going against Schoolboy Rowe
That's
going.
a boy.
Yeah. So anyways, in this game, this is a fascinating element of the game because the game goes 12 innings.
Oh my God.
Yes, and Schoolboy Rowe goes all 12 innings. Pitches a complete game. Tigers win 3-2. And Schoolboy Rowe goes the full 12 innings.
Jeez.
And this is what, that's
what
just
got to be unheard of.
It's what's unheard of. It's unheard of for a 12-inning complete game. In the normal game is 9 innings. He pitches 12.
Right.
Complete game. The Tigers win 3-2.
How many pitchers today pitch 12 innings?
Come on, in a month,
2 games,
in a month, yeah. Yeah, so dude. So that's what I'm saying. Like Rowe, he's he pitches all the whole series. He's there, and then in 35 he pitches even more. Like he's coming on in relief in a couple of games later and stuff. Or I think he comes on in relief like the day after one of the games he started. So. But yeah, so he pitches 12 innings, but this is bringing G Walker. This is a G Walker moment.
All-Stars.
Yeah, but G Walker, we were talking about him as this character that he was equally capable of being a hero 1 second, and then a complete goat the next. Goat in the old way. Now they say goat meaning like greatest of all time, but in this sense meaning like 1 second he's getting cheers, and then the next second he's being booed by the same people for some horrible mistake. And here we go right here. So it's a perfect example of G Walker. Perfect example in this game too. Okay, so I'm going to set the situation. Tigers are down 2-1 in the ninth. 2-1 in the ninth. Okay. So Pete Fox gets on first base with a single. There's life. Okay, Schoolboy Rowe comes up, still in the game, ninth inning, pitching and hitting. And he comes up, lays down a bunt, advances Pete Fox to second. Nice. Tying runs on second base. G Walker comes in the game as a pinch hitter to replace JoJo White. Okay, and he comes up to bat, laces a single into the outfield. Actually, let me set it back. At first, he pops the ball up, and it lands in the first baseman and catcher mistake each other, like basically bump into each other. So the ball lands foul. It should have been caught, easy out by the thing. And so the ball drops foul, and so there's still life in him. He should have been out in that moment. But then, already given it away, that the very next, like a pitch or two later, he laces a single, and the game-tying run scores. Oh. He's a hero. This is in Detroit. The fans are going insane. G Walker, our favorite player, just scored, drove in the tying run. It's the ninth inning. Yeah. Even as the ninth inning, this is the game this is the run that ties the game. And then just a pitch or two later, thrown out at first by the pitcher. The pitcher gets tagged out at first, gets picked off on first base.
Oh my God!
Just like a pitch, pitch or two later, he gets thrown out at first base. So 1 second, he's just tied the game in the ninth. The game 2 of the World Series ties it in the ninth with this after this crazy bit of luck where the ball drops foul. So he's a hero. Oh, G Walker, we love you. And then the next second, he's tagged out at first.
Just encapsulate his career entirety.
That's it right there. That's what I'm saying. That just to bring in his story into these key moments where they go, he's the greatest ever. We love G. And then the next second, tagged out at first, and it's a horrible play. So
but at least we're tied up.
Well, now we're tied. Going into the extra innings. That's what I'm saying. Like, that's really just the maddening element of that player was like, they couldn't. I just look back and just go, knowing they knew that too. They knew that type of player that he was, and for years he had been like that.
You gotta wonder what he's walking back in the dugout. Well, there you go again, G.
Thanks a lot.
Way to go.
But you don't know whether to hug him and shake his hand or to friggin' smack him inside the head. What do you do? What I'm saying? That's like the type of character he was. And in fact, there's a great article that tied in, which is it was from a couple years earlier that the Bucky Harris, the previous manager, had tried to tame him. It's a fantastic. I love the quote because they tried to tame G Walker and just say, listen, every time you get on base, you're not to steal. Every time you do this, you're not to do this. They tried to frame his, to be like, to tamper that, the wildness of him, and so he has a horrible year that particular year, dreadful, very, very mediocre year. Yeah. And so this guy says in there, he says, Look what they did to G. Walker. They've turned the wild Mustang of the range into old Dobbin. And they're like every, he says in this quote, is in the second book, he says, you don't win a race with old Dobbin. You don't win the race with the wild Mustang of the range. You see, like, but that was just the way he said, you don't win it with old Dobbin. I just love, but I always love that terminology. It's like, you don't win a race with old Dobbin. You win a race with the wild.
Dobbin's not going to do you no good.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, he says, he goes, you're not going to win a race with old Dobbin. And he's like, everybody, it drives everybody crazy. But at least he has the half moment of greatness, where some players don't even have that. Right. That's sort of the point. And Connie Mack actually made that point about him too.
So the extra innings, was anything got us through those extras?
Yeah, finally the Tigers win the extra innings. Goose Goslin singles in Charlie Gehringer for the winning run. Tigers win. Series is even headed into St. Louis. And then they get to St. Louis. Tigers beat the Cardinals 4-1. Tommy Britt, or I'm sorry, I take that back. Cardinals beat the Tigers 4-1. Oh. Paul Dean is the winning pitcher. Tommy Bridge is the losing pitcher. Hank Greenberg with an RBI triple is the only run of that the Tigers score. Paul Dean has a complete game. Tommy Bridges 8 innings pitched. So Cardinals are up 2-1 at that point.
All
so
right.
Tigers said, Cardinals ahead in the series. Game 4.
Still in St. Louis?
Still in St. Louis. You have the Knocker and the Tigers beat the player named Walker, pitcher named Walker, 10-4. So Tigers win. They even up the series.
10-4.
Monster games by Bill Rogel and Hank Greenberg with 4 RBIs and 3 RBIs respectively.
That's got to feel good on the road.
Absolutely. So then you have El Knocker complete games. Cardinals, it took them 5 pitchers to get through the game. But here's an especially important element of this game was that at one point in the game, I forgot what inning it was, but at one point in the game, the Cardinals get a man on first, and Dizzy Dean enters the game as a pinch runner. Okay, like their best player comes in as a pinch runner. Right?
Okay,
and so he comes in, and then there's a play at second base. There's a ball gets hit to second base. Charlie Gehringer fields it, flips it to Bill Rogel at short. And Dizzy Dean's coming into second base, and he doesn't slide. He's like running face up, like he just runs in standing.
Yeah.
And Bill Rogel throws the ball, thinking that every player in the world is going to slide into the bag at that moment, but
except
he doesn't.
Most of your pitchers,
except for Dizzy Dean, who's like really not a professional base runner,
right.
He gets hit in the head by this ball, and there's this dramatic moment in St. Louis where all the Cardinals gather him up like in like a gurney type of a situation, and they carry poor Dizzy off. He's unconscious. They take him off the field.
Was dizzy after that.
He's done. Yeah, he's like they're like, oh God, Dizzy.
Tweet the birds.
Yeah. So here's Dizzy. He's Dizzy's done. Oh my God, is Dizzy done or whatever? And there's they call it an apocryphal news article, saying the next day that the doctors X-ray his head and find nothing. That's like the joke of the day. But he was fine. He came back and pitched the next day. He got beat the next game in Game 5 by Tommy Bridges. Tommy Bridges has a complete game. Dizzy Dean 8 innings pitched. But at this moment now, the Tigers have taken that. The Tigers are ahead in the series 3-2.
Game 5. Where do we play that?
Game 5 was in what do I have here? Again, St. Louis.
Okay.
Yep, St. Louis.
So the middle 3 take place.
So Tigers win 2 out of 3 in St. Louis.
Nice.
And so that's what I'm saying. So now the Tigers are up 3-2. This is like they're now they can maybe gamble a little bit in their play because this like I say they're up in the series.
So we come back to Detroit for Game 6
for Game 6, and
this could be it.
This could be it.
But
unfortunately, it's not. So you have. So Paul Dean and Schoolboy Rowe both have complete games. And what's interesting about this game is you have Paul Dean drives in the winning run, which it turns out to be the winning run in the 7th inning. But the pitcher drives in the winning run, which is like one of my favorite things ever, is like when pitchers can hit. That's one of the things I believe that baseball absolutely need. Like right now, like they're basically like people blame pitchers, like all pitchers are so bad in baseball they can't hit. Pitchers can't hit really, but like whose fault is that? I mean, if you're not going to develop a pitcher to hit, why would you expect them to be able to hit? So the fault of that is not on the pitchers. The fault is on it's like saying
you would have a different caliber and a different
Totally different dynamic
of pitchers if they had to hit and run.
Absolutely.
Too. Yeah.
Well, that's why I look at the way that the bringing the designated hitter into the American League. I've always viewed it as one of the worst things to ever happen in baseball. I grew up with a designated hitter. I always used to think that it was great, but
I grew up with a traffic pylon.
That's designated.
Knocking it always a T-ball. That's different.
Yeah, but the idea with the designated hitter was that it could, it would add allow older players to, that can't play a position anymore to still be in the game. But the question is why is that so important? Why is it so important to prolong a player's a longtime star's career? Why does the league have to do that? That's what my mentality is now. Like I used to agree with that mentality, but now it's like, isn't it better to have like the next big thing coming up and playing a position? And then, it's like, for pitchers, the dynamic that it used to be was that these pitchers, when you signed a pitcher, knowing that the pitcher had to hit, it forced you to say, okay, this guy can pitch great. That's great. How can he hit? You know what I mean? So if you had a pitcher, you could have, one guy who was like an elite pitcher, but a terrible hitter, right? But if you had a pitcher that was like sort of an average pitcher, but an average hitter, you know what I mean? That's a whole different,
Sure.
It's almost like the equal of that same pitcher. So you actually identify talent with that sort of, with that in mind. But what happened is that they basically just stopped evaluating pitchers on their ability to hit and or even developing pitchers' ability to hit and just completely focused on the pitching.
It's way of an aside, but it's just a trend in all sports. And there's so many like repetitive injuries because like back in the day, way back, kids would play different sports and athletes would play different sports. Even like in college, you'd have the football team scrimmaging with the basketball team and, there'd just be this thing. Now people are so specialized to a sport and then even specialized to a skill within that sport.
Exactly.
And there's no depth to the players. That's what
I'm trying to say is that a lot of times that's one of the things that I love about history is how is like a lot of times this is I again all the stuff I say like this I was from the same mentality. I used to think that like modern day sports we've learned so much and developed our sports have evolved. We use the word evolve like it's improved because of we're it's almost like a modern arrogance. We're a much better and more sophisticated game now than we ever were.
But all these specialized people, there's not this dynamic.
That's what I'm trying to say.
There's no dynamics
take away
to it.
from those, like one of the most incredible moments in baseball. You can take a look at this, later on. Is Bartolo Colon from the New York Mets. This is from like 4 years ago. Bartolo Colon is like this. He's been for the early part of his career, he was just a tremendous pitcher, a fabulous pitcher. And as the guy, I forgot how old he is now. He's like 50 something, and he's still pitching and he's still, serviceable. He can still, he's still decent. And he's put on weight and he's a little larger now and he's, he's got this kind of, big smile on his face and he's just a guy that everybody loves, he loves this guy. And so it was 3-4 years ago. Bartolo Colon hits his first home run of his career, right?
I love it.
And I'm telling you, if you want to see something special, most people watching the show have probably seen it because it's such, you look it on YouTube, it's like probably 20 million hits for this, okay? I've probably watched it myself 10 times because it's such an incredible moment. Yeah. Because when he hits this, it's like the worst swing you ever seen, right? It's like almost like a one-handed swing. And the ball, is launched into the, and the fans are just going insane. Right? And then the announcer's going, it's out of here, Bartolo. It's so exciting at that moment. And that's what I mean. Like, it might have been kind of a joke that this guy had hit his first career home run after like 15 years in the majors or something, but it's iconic. We're sitting here talking about it now. Like, that's what I mean. Like, but actually having games where the pitchers are, that's becomes, again, using the word dynamic again, that becomes a game dynamic. You have a guy like, Dizzy Dean was an awesome pitcher and really not a very good hitter, a terrible hitter. But you have Schoolboy Rowe, who was I don't think he was as good as Dizzy Dean as a pitcher, but he was a million times better as a hitter. Yeah. He's one of the best, like I gotta say, I think I said this on another show, is that he wasn't just a good hitter, a good hitting pitcher. He was one of the best hitters in baseball, just flat out. Like
Right.
if you put him at first base, he would have been one of the best hitters in baseball. He was tremendous. And that's what I'm saying. So now you got a guy, with his Schoolboy Roll, like that's a dynamic. Is a guy, his 16th win, Schoolboy Roll drives in his own winning run to win his 16th game like that, and he was a legit hitter. So it wasn't a novelty.
Right.
You know what I mean? You actually had a guy that was like, imagine that kind of experience where the pitcher, and people will say, oh man, that's some old dinosaur. That's some old, that's some old, they call it what do they call that for baseball? That's a traditionalist view. That's not the modern view.
Right.
But the question, this is what gets me, all right, is that when it brings back to what you were saying about the specialization of sports. And it really has, because back in football, back in the day, same thing. Players would play both ways, offense and defense. Now they're like every positions. Like this guy's only to be used on third downs and passing situations.
I'm a long snapper.
Exactly. I'm only for long snapping. I'm only for this. I only do that. Same thing in pitching. Now baseball is a guy's like, you only use this left-handed pitcher in the 6th inning in the month of June against a right-handed, guy that was born in the 1980s or something. Like it's so specialized. It's crazy now. But the question that I have is the question where I'm trying to go with this is that if looking at baseball, it is, and they're talking about getting rid of the designated hitter or adding the designated hitter in the National League for next year. In fact, they almost did it for this current season with this Corona situation. But just imagine this, and I'll imagine this for the viewer at home watching this, is that if the specialization increases, what's to stop teams now going forward? Okay, what's to stop teams now from going forward saying, we want a designated hitter for our second baseman. We want a designated hitter for our shortstop because they're not good hitters either. They're more known for their defense,
right?
Because they have so many pitchers and so many specialized pitchers. Now all of a sudden they have specialized defenders now. Guys are only defenders. And so now you got these major league teams that are like 70 roster size and guys that are only playing I only play defense. I only play offense. Right. Imagine that's the same, like that's, that going towards that, like, does it make would that improve as far as would it make better, elite defenders and also elite hitters? Sure it would. But would it be more fun to watch?
Right.
Would it really be that much more fun to watch? It's the trade-offs in abilities, like, which you have to factor in for every team, which makes it interesting, which makes it, which gives it that dynamic of, a Schoolboy Rowe hitting his own walk-off, whereas Dizzy could barely bunt the ball. That's what I'm saying. Like, like our advantage is like Dizzy's the best pitcher, but we got a guy that can hit and pitch. So like we actually have a better chance. You know what I mean? Like that's what I'm trying to say. So I just think that, the next step, I mean, it's the next, if you're talking, if you're talking about like the next step of the game, it might sound crazy to say, oh, there's a designated hitter for a second baseman, but record this episode. Remember, I said it first. So anyways,
Game 6, right?
Game 6. So Tigers are ahead, going into Game 6, and in Detroit, and Paul Dean beats Schoolboy Rowe to even the series. Again, so like I say, Paul Dean drives in the winning run in the 7th inning. And so it brings up Game 7, which, of course, it needs really no introduction. Game 7, the final game.
Where are they playing?
In Detroit.
Okay, stays in Detroit.
So I guess it does need a little introduction. It's in Detroit. So Game 7, everything's on the line. Prior to the game, the Cardinals manager, Frankie Frisch, she's also their second baseman. See, that's when back in the day they did everything. Guys, a second baseman, manager. Tigers had Mickey Cochran, a catcher, and their manager.
Yeah.
So they had 2-player managers battling against each other in the game. That's just tremendous. So anyways, in this game, the Frankie Frisch, the manager for the Cardinals, announces prior to the game that I forget his first name. Hallahan is his last name. The pitcher Hallahan. That Hallahan is going to start in Game 7, right?
Old Hanrahan.
Yeah. So Hallahan is going to start, and Ocker is going to start for the Tigers. And so Dizzy Dean had pitched 2 days prior, and so he's 2 days is kind of short notice to bring a pitcher back for another game. Usually you'd like to get at least 3 or 4.
Right.
World Series is not uncommon for somebody to go 2-3 games in between pitching, but anyways, so. It's like the ultimate fake out because it's not Hallahan starting for Game 7. It's Dizzy Dean, right? And they only announced that and the Tigers only find that out when Dizzy Dean is actually on the mound.
Yeah.
And they're like going, "What are you doing?" Yeah, they're like, what are you doing?
Are you warming up the guys? What are you doing? What are you doing?
Yeah, and there's like, no, I'm about to beat you guys. He goes, don't worry. He says something along the lines of like, don't worry, it'll be over soon. Don't worry, it'll be over soon. So so anyways, and he wasn't wrong, because the Tigers get absolutely destroyed in Game 7. And this is which brings back to what that lady was saying to me at that art show about how devastating of a loss this was, because it wasn't like they just, they lost like 3-2 in the ninth inning and by such a close margin. They were literally beaten in every facet of the game, in every single which way you could possibly get beaten. They make 3 errors. Well, first of all, they lose the game 11-0.
Oof.
Dizzy Dean's on the mound.
Shut out.
Yeah, shut out at home, 11-0. Yes, and not only that, but you have three Tiger errors. They make 3 errors, and JoJo White and Goose Gosling. Okay, they make errors, but Charlie Gehringer. Yeah. Gehringer makes the 3rd error, and his nickname is the Mechanical Man. This is a guy that he's nicknamed that because of his one of the reasons is because of his elite fielding ability at second base. Like, he makes every play. And then here he is in the Game 7 of the World Series, makes an error. Like, this is Charlie. So every single thing of component that can go wrong. They burn through pitchers one after another. Eldon Ocker gives up 4 earned runs. Schoolboy Rowe comes in, gives up 2 earned runs. Chief Hogsett comes in, gives up a run. Tommy Bridges comes in and gives up 2 runs. I mean, they're just burning through pitchers that are just getting shelled. They just get drubbed in every single. And then to make matters even uglier is. We talked about it earlier episode is just mentioned it, but they call it the Medwick incident, and it's in the 6th inning, and the Tigers are getting beat. I don't even know. It looks like it's like 6-0 at that point. But there'd already been a couple incidents where the Tiger players had been spiked by Cardinal. In fact, Mickey Cochran and Schoolboy Rowe had both been spiked at one point or another, and had to go after the game, go to the hospital to get their wounds patched up or whatever. And so there'd already been sort of a couple other incidents leading up to this point, and then in the 6th inning, Ducky Medwick, they call him Joe Ducky Medwick. He's a Hall of Famer, but he's one of the best hitters on their team. Spikes Marv Owen at third base, spikes him, and the Tigers are getting pounded at home, and this guy cuts this guy's legs off from underneath him at third base, and it just takes the frustration of that day. And, now they actually have a face to put to their anger, and it's this Ducky Medwick. And so after the inning's over, the Medwick returns to his position in left field, and the fans they were just showering him with everything they could. Anything they could possibly get their hands on, they were throwing stuff at him.
It's like the bleacher creatures, just not happy.
And so he couldn't even take his position, and they could not calm this. I mean, there's this throng of humanity that they have in left field. They've actually built these temporary bleachers that held 15,000 fans.
Oh my God!
I mean, there's 15,000 fans up in this section, and they had built special bleachers for this one World Series game, and it's just this furious mob that are just pelting the field with all this stuff. And so Commissioner Landis removes Medwick from the game. Commissioner removes the player. They can't calm the fans down, and they remove the player from the game. And he's like, Medwick's like, what did I do? What did I do to get removed from this game? Yeah. And they're like, look, if we don't remove you from this game, it's never going to end.
Right.
These fans are irate, right? Yeah. And so
you might want to head to the bus now.
Yeah. They were that mad. So so you can see this, that alone shows you the emotion at this moment where they know the season's over. Yeah. They know it's over. They know this incredible season has ended by their team just getting shellacked. And in their minds, they're thinking to themselves was this, the national media narrative at that moment is that the Tigers were really just had gotten lucky that year. They'd captured lightning in a bottle. Teams were on it, didn't expect them. They stayed healthy. They were, they sort of got lucky, I guess.
Yeah.
And so the fans in themselves, they might go, no, our team's awesome. We're going to come back next year. But you don't know that.
No.
You don't know that. This could have been their one chance.
Yeah.
In their 3 chances prior, 1907, 1908, 1909, they hadn't been to the World Series since then. Yeah. Would there not be a World Series till 1968 again? 20 years. Following the same pattern. Yeah. So you can see the frustration of these, of the moment and how they're, they're throwing stuff on the field. Of course, that shows one way, but just the, following the game, the disappointment, where it's like, they won the American League pennant. That's great, the American League championship, but they wanted a World Series.
Yeah.
They
Did you
wanted
have
a World
anything about
Series.
Mickey's reaction afterwards? We know what he says in spring training next year.
Yeah, off the top of my head, I don't.
Yeah.
I'm sure I could probably dredge something up out of the quotes in the back because there's a ton of season quotes at the end of the book. But he usually he went hunting in the off season, calmed his nerves because he was so intense. He was just such an intense character that he'd have to go out into Wyoming to go hunting for the off season to just get away from baseball because it was it just consumed him when he was playing. But his thing was of course going into 35 is it was that same Mickey Cochran that redirected these people's minds and being like, we went to the, just like I said last year, we went to the World Series. This year we're winning it. This year we're winning the World Series this year. And so that redirected these Tigers fans from this sense of grief to a sense of the great expectations.
Sure.
The great expectations of 1935 saying, this is a new year. We're going to do it this year. Now it's now we know what we have. Now we can really get behind these guys and going to spring training and getting excited about the team.
But sports are on the rise here in Detroit.
Yeah.
34 is bubbling up, right?
Yeah.
So you got Garwood doing some amazing stuff. You got the Tigers now had an amazing season.
Yeah, the big thing was the
Lions.
The big thing was actually the arrival of the Lions in 1934.
Yeah,
with along the way.
So was that in the midst of this season that the Lions got there?
The Lions when the Lions came again, the Lions they came from Portsmouth, Ohio, and they were a tremendous team in Portsmouth. They were Portsmouth, just like Green Bay was
it's
a
just
small
funny
town.
to hear somebody say the Lions were a tremendous team.
Well, they were the Portsmouth Spartans, and they were a tremendous. So you had the.
It's just funny to hear. I'm just making Detroit jokes.
I get you, man. I know it's sad. It is sad, but it's just going to make that when they do win a championship at some point, it's going to make it that much greater. I mean, this city is going to explode, man.
Sure.
If Lions win the Super Bowl, come on, it's going to be the greatest party the city's ever seen.
So next time we'll talk about the 35 Tigers, the team themselves, and then after that we'll get on to the Lions after that one.
Yeah,
so that's what's coming up in the next two episodes.
It's all fun, man. They're such great. The Lions, the Lions is man. I can't wait for all of it. I look forward to it because it's fun. There's so much, and I think it's integral. Really, sheds light on who we are. How we got here.
Yeah.
How these teams, were the Tigers. This is really where we, the mania that came in these seasons. Kind of, it almost shows us the kind of mania that we have. In 68 and 84 and these other big seasons that the team has.
All right. So next time is going to be Great Expectations.
We're going to
look at the team.
Tigers. Yep.
And then from there, we'll move on and start talking about the Lions themselves and them getting into the city because we're going to save the three winning for later on. We're going to dive into the teams and we'll get to those winning.
Yeah, so if anybody's
games.
watching, we lead up to these events, to the 35 World Series, the 35 NFL Championship, the Joe Louis's greatest fight in 1935.
Yeah.
The defining moments of each of these teams' year. We want to put them all together at the end because they happen in such a short amount of time.
Yeah.
They happen in such a condensed time frame, and that's how I wanted to cover. I wanted somebody to be able to watch each episode or maybe even watch one episode where we just, ramble through them all real quick and then break. Because that was one of the biggest things with these books is that the story of the City of Champions or the story of Detroit sports has always been told in piecemeal fashion.
Sure.
The history of the Tigers, the history of the Lions, the history of the Red Wings. Yeah. And a lot of times we're like, I only care about the Tigers, so that's all I want to read. But I hope the viewers are starting to see, people are starting to see is that these stories are really all intertwined with each other. With the Lions coming to Detroit, the NFL sees an opportunity to take advantage of the new enthusiasm of the renaissance of baseball, and they named the team the Lions based on the Tigers. They wanted to keep it with the jungle theme. They nicknamed their marketing their best player Dutch Clark as the Ty Cobb of football. I mean, these are not coincidences. They're trying to associate with the wildly popular Tigers to establish an NFL team, whereas 3 NFL attempts in Detroit had failed. Yeah. You see, that's what I'm saying. It's understanding how all these teams intersect in this story is essential for understanding Detroit sports history.
I would go so far as to say that the autos and manufacturing, and then the music, Motown, and all the other music that we have, and then this year in sports is what creates the soul of the city.
100%.
It really,
Yeah.
I think it's critical
100%.
to understanding why,
Yeah.
people say Detroit soul, and this is like a third of it.
Absolutely.
Right here in this year.
That's like I've said it before, like the idea, it's like trying to understand why Detroit's the Motor City without mentioning Henry Ford.
Yeah.
You can't you try explaining the history of Detroit as the Motor City, but you're not allowed to mention Henry Ford, or maybe you can kind of briefly reference him, but you're not allowed to emphasize him in the story of the Motor City. It's impossible. Yeah. And the same concept with Motown, with music. You're allowed to talk about say that Detroit's Motown, but you're not allowed to talk about Motown, the actual Motown itself, or Berry Gordy or any of these other. Like, how can you do that? It's impossible. You lose everything. Same with Detroit sports. Why are we such diehard fans here? I mean, every few years Detroit is ranked by I think it was 2014. Detroit was ranked by the Associated Press as the greatest sports town in America. That trades hands, and we're not absolutely the greatest sports town, but we're regarded as one of the great sports towns, and there's certainly an affinity that we tell everybody that we're the greatest sports fans around. We take pride in that. We view that as one of our great identities. But but we don't talk about the fact that we won 33 championships in the same season, or that all three of our favorite teams won their first championships in the same season, or that Joe Louis, who's one of the most impactful, one of the most broke, like Jackie Robinson breaking color barriers. Jackie Robinson himself said there would be, I would not have had my opportunity in baseball if it wasn't for Joe Louis in boxing. And Joe Louis comes out of Detroit in 1934 and 35. Yeah. So that's what I'm trying to say is like this story intersects all of it. His story is. It's important,
And I say we were diving deep into the stories, but really, honestly, we're just scratching the surface. There's so much. Yeah. This is like a 7-year labor of love for you. Yeah. Detroit City of Champions. The podcast. The website is.
For the website for the books, DetroitCityOfChampions.com. Easiest website in the world. If you talk about Detroit City, you type in Detroit City of Champions, it's like the first thing that comes up. Yeah.
So there you go. So DetroitCityOfChampions.com, and then give us a like, subscribe, leave a comment. We appreciate it. You can email us. There's ways to get a hold of us off of the Detroit City of Champions website, and then of course
Facebook and that too. Yeah,
Facebook.
We got that thing going. Yeah. What's the Facebook? It's Detroit City of Champions on there, isn't it? Yeah. Yep. Okay. Good.
Yep. So there you go. So we'll be back next week with more and some great expectations.
Great expectations.
All right.